Hey everybody, I thought I'd go through my Art of George Pérez book. This is really cool. I love this book. I remember reading it. It's been a while though, so I'd like to read through it again. And some stuff I read, some stuff I won't. But I don't want it to take too long. But hopefully, if I do read it all and everything, you'll appreciate it, because it's like an audio book or something of this big giant book that I have of his. Everything is just a hardcover. It's really beautiful. He's this Crimson Plague character. All the characters in there. So perhaps the iconic superhero artist for a generation, George Pérez, has been putting his pencil to paper and thrilling comic book fans with his dramatic and detailed art for almost 40 years. This book offers readers and fans a chance to witness his immense and sensational career from his early days at Marvel to his glory days at DC, where he co-created the new Teen Titans, which rivaled the X-Men in popularity at the time, and revitalized Wonder Woman as both writer and artist. This volume also offers glimpses of never-before-seen material from his files and sketchbooks, private commissioned work, as well as beautifully reproduced images of his personal favorites with insights into his life and creative process. That was cool. From the publishing house, designer and editor of the Eisner Award-winning The Art of Brian Boland, the Eisner Award nominated The Art of P. Craig Russell, The Art of Joe Jusko, Archetype, The Art of Timothy Bradstreet, Tony Harris, Art and Skullduggery, Rolling Thunder, The Art of Dave Dorman, The Art of Jim Starlin, A Life in Words and Pictures, and Jeffrey Jones, A Life in Art. Really cool. Just really nice artwork. That's all the detail that he puts in everything. And I'm not sure who colored this. He has a colorist that works with him a lot. It's really nice. Maybe it's Tom Smith, that's it. But George must have inked that because there's no inker listed, but really, really cool. So just a second. Okay, let's open this up. Hopefully I get to meet him. He said he's going to be doing, I think, some conventions to do signings, but he's just not doing any artwork anymore. You see, I'd love to have his signature somewhere in here. Maybe to get his signature on the cover in gold or silver or something like that. And then maybe he could pay him to draw a picture on the inside cover. That'd be cool. But here's picture there. The Art of George Pérez. Text by George Pérez, Cliff Biggers. Edits and design by Joe Pruitt. IDW editor Justin Eisinger. So he's got some more Man Wolf stuff he did. 2012. Contents. It's a lot of pages. And special thanks. You got an introduction by Jim Starlin in here. You look at the pencil work. It's like, wow. Let me see what this says here. What I know. The truth is, what I don't know is George Pérez. So does that make me the perfect choice for writing an introduction to the impressive tome you're presently holding? Apparently. Both George and I began our respective careers in comics back in the 70s. Him a few years later than me. Around then I was living in California. He in New York. As it would turn out, George was usually working for DC Comics while I was occupied over at Marvel Comics. Then a Pavlovian bell would ring, one that obviously only George and I could hear, and we'd switch companies. That has been pretty much a constant for the past 40-some years. During that time, George and I have had maybe a half dozen brief conversations. At comic book conventions, both of us would be kept separated by fans and the hundreds of comics that required autographing. After the show shut down for the night, we'd be whisked off to dine with our respective publishers. No real contact has ever been fostered. That's just the way it is in this industry sometimes. I never met Jim Aparo until years after we finished our joint run on the Batman series. Wow. George and I are acquaintances, not friends. There's no bad blood between us that I know of. Mr. Pérez has always struck me as a very nice guy and a gentleman. Yeah, he is. You'll have to ask him what he thinks of me. I haven't a clue. We only worked together once, and he stepped away before finishing that particular project. Why? I don't know. I've had a few different explanations concerning his premature departure from the series. He's never personally given me a reason for the unexpected exit. I've never asked. So right about now, you've got to be asking, why in heck did Desperado Publishing ask this jerk to write George's intro? The answer is simple. That one job that George and I worked on briefly together was the Infinity Gauntlet. This turned out to be a milestone in both George's and my own careers. It was a monster hit when it first came out, and is now probably one of the most reprinted series in the comic book industry. I personally signed about a zillion copies of different editions of the story. If that was the only job either George and I ever worked on, period, the Infinity Gauntlet would surely secure both of us a spot in comics pop culture history. Yes, it was an awesome story. Now they got a movie. But that's far from the only hit George Pérez was involved in. His successes are many and myriad. Early on, he and Marv Wolfman took a very second-tier title over at DC Comics and morphed the Teen Titans into one of the company's major and longest-lasting series. The two of them then turned the DC Comics universe on its collective ear with their Crisis on Infinite Earths series. Wow. Another bestseller and a story that has most likely been reprinted even more often than the Infinity Gauntlet. Then there have been epic runs on the Avengers, Superman, Wonder Woman, War of the Gods, the Avengers JLA crossover, Infinite Crisis, and so many other titles. It's a body of work that few but Jack Kirby could rival. Most cartoonists come into the business wanting to draw their own highly personalized version of every superhero in the business. Nearly all soon get past this passion, opting for single character jobs instead. Not George. It seems the more characters Mr. Pérez has to draw on a page, the happier the man is. This alone makes George a standout in our business. Of course, there's also his great storytelling ability and his unique page layouts. No wonder the guy has lasted as long as he has. In recent years, the torrent that has been George Pérez has slowed a bit, with him now dedicating a good deal of his time to raising money for different charities, locally and with groups connected to the comic book business. Last I heard, he's still co-chairman of Hero Initiative, an organization that helps freelance cartoonists with their medical bills. Looking back and just skimming through this book, one can't help but come to the conclusion that Mr. Pérez has enjoyed a very illustrious career and extremely good life. He's both entertained and helped. What more need be said about a man? So come full circle again, I ask. Why was I asked to write the intro to this book? Well, the answer to that question is painfully apparent. When it comes to a book about George Pérez with his art, what does it matter who writes the intro? The work itself speaks volumes. Yeah, very cool. Jim Starlin. If you look at this, I found one of these books at Half Price Books the other day. It's worth a lot of money. I think it's going for pretty good, about $8 to $12, something like that, maybe a little more. But it's just amazing. I think they even made a poster of this. It's like, wow. Just amazing. the 70s. The artwork. Monsters Unleashed number 8, page 66, inked by Duffy Voland, 1974. Very cool. So I began working with Rich Buckler in 1973, after I got married. My whole time there lasted only about 6 months. That was pretty much it. By the time I had been there for 6 months, editors had gotten used to seeing my face and they knew what I could do. They knew I was Rich's assistant, but they also knew that my style was changing quite a bit and that I didn't just draw like Rich. Rich was responsible for my first work, a 2-page gag strip for Astonishing Tales number 25, the first Deathlock issue. He thought it was something I could do less harm to than something more work extensive. The only thing I didn't draw in that 2-page gag strip was the Deathlock figure. Deathlock was Rich's baby, and no one was going to draw him other than Rich. He worked more closely with other assistants like Keith Pollard and Arvell Jones, whom he had known longer and worked more in his style. Rich was doing Kirby-esque work back then, and he was looking for Kirby references. I would help with that, and sometimes I did a little layout work. I had pretty good sense of Kirby myself at that time. There was only one issue of Fantastic Four where I did the layout work. It ended up being a book that Rich didn't pencil, so those layouts were never used. My first shot at working on a more extensive story was Gulliver of Mars, for Monsters Unleashed. Rich and I had pretty much parted ways at that point. Jim Salyukrup and Tony Isabella suggested that I do the Gulliver of Mars story. I was hungry enough that I jumped at it, and as a result I ended up getting the other series that no one else wanted. They were supposed to be for one issue, but they kept on going. My first Deadly Hands of Kung Fu was ghosted by Denny O'Neil, under the name Jim Dennis, and then the stories went on to Bill Mantlo. Bill was happy to work with a new artist, so I became the regular illustrator. I was then partnered with Dave Kraft on Man-Wolf and Creatures on the Loose. Both of those assignments became regular gigs. It's really cool. There's some more art here. Just all the details, like, my goodness. Occupation Force. I appreciate the fact that Rich got me in the door, and that opened the way for my regular work. Later, when Rich fell behind on a Fantastic Four annual, they remembered I had been his assistant, and they called me up. Even though my style was moving away from his at the time, I worked with Joe Sinnott on that, and he cleaned me up and made me look great. Rather than appearing in an annual, they became 2 issues of the regular run. The 2-part story brought me to Stan Lee's attention. Stan saw the art and was very impressed, but was surprised to see a name he didn't recognize in the credits. So he called me into the office, complimented me, and that was when I got my first raise. That meeting led to a friendship that has lasted to well over 3.5 decades now. Wow. That page there is Unknown Worlds of Science Fiction number 3, page 8, inked by Klaus Janson, 1975. That's that. And this over here is Unknown Worlds of Science Fiction number 2, page 8, inked by Rico Rival. That's cool. Here's Marvel Preview number 20, frontispiece, inked by Pablo Marcos, 1979. Wow. Look at that detail. This one's Creatures on the Loose, number 34, page 1, inked by Frank McLaughlin. 1975. Wow. This one. I did very little fanzine work. I had my two fanzine publishers, Jim Glenn and Pat O'Neill, and they were doing Factors Unknown, a small digest-sized fanzine. I don't remember it if it was memoed or not, but it was typical fanzine. But it was typical fanzine production. It wasn't setting the world on fire. It had a print run in the low hundreds, but Jim and Pat were enthusiastic. They loved what they did, and they loved doing their own comics. They saw my work, thanks to a mutual friend, Sal Cortuccio. As a result, I did 2 issues of Factors Unknown. I also did work for Sal on his fanzine Hot Stuff, and a story with female characters in another Jim Glenn fanzine called Hot Shot. Ironically, my fan work in Hot Shot actually came out after I had my first professional work printed. I was starting to get my feet wet in the professional arena by that time, so I only did a few stories total as a fan before I broke into the pro ranks. Overleaf, Preachers on the Loose, number 36, pages 16 and 17. Let's see if it's going to be on the next page here. Yep, wow. Look at the detail. They went wild with the colors, though. Wow, wow, wow. That's cool. All right, I'm going to stop this here, and I'll go through this whole book like this and take my time, and hopefully you enjoy the videos when you watch them and everything. I'm going to read it, and then, like I said, you'll get to watch them, look at them and everything, and you'll get to hear what he wrote. In case you don't have this book, you'll get to get me reading it for you and everything. Hopefully I'll do it justice. But thank you very much for watching. You guys have a great day. Collected Dude out.